I believe that technology in whatever shape or form is not going away. It's going to continuously evolve. And whether it makes our lives easier or worse is up for debate.
The Security Shift Podcast. Physical security is changing faster than ever. The Security Shift brings together the founders, consultants, security leaders, innovators, and technology companies shaping what's next. This is where ideas become partnerships, conversations become opportunities, and the entire physical security ecosystem comes together. The Security Shift Podcast. Shifting the perspective.
Hey, welcome to the Security Shift, shifting the perspective. Today we have an amazing guest, known this guy for quite a bit. Look forward to kind of digging in, kind of seeing what he's up to these days. And we do chat a good bit, so maybe that's an understatement. But I want to welcome Steve Such to the show from Valentis. How's it going, Steve?
Good, Bill. How are you?
Great.
Always happy to talk to you. It's always a pleasure. Always.
Yeah. So you want me to go a little backstory before you get into your side of a little bit about you?
Sure.
Yeah. So this is just no holds barred. There's nothing non-PC here, but I met Steve. I worked with Steve quite a few years ago, back in 2013. I did some job searching back in the Pittsburgh area where I'm from. And I joke around about this, but it is true. I chased a girl. That was a part of it. But nevertheless, I applied for a couple different regional business development positions back in the area. And we actually had a funny story. And I forgot this, and I always say this, me and you know this. I was in a limo from the airport years prior to me and you ever even meeting. And I had your card. Your sister was a driver. You had a driving company or something like that. I can't remember what the name of that was. And that's how I even knew about you. But I was like, oh, it's cool to know this guy, Steve, and I'm in the security business. Maybe I'll talk to him sometime. I don't think we've ever talked, or maybe we did. Not sure. But full circle, 2013, September 2013, I think I decided in August, hey, I'm going to look for opportunities in the Pittsburgh area. I applied a couple places, came back there for some interviews, and in December, I'm moving to Pittsburgh. So
I remember that. You moved out at Latrobe, I believe. That's what.
Yeah, I lived in Latrobe. Yeah, yep.
I remember
training camp, home of the Steelers. Yeah, I am a Steeler fan.
There's always a good reason I like you, Bill. Always a Steeler fan.
So, Steve. Well, welcome to the show. I know we chatted about doing this. We watch each other from afar for a long time. I'm back out here in Arizona now, but we're always talking about something or thinking about something to cook up together. Just tell me a little bit about you and Valentis, and look forward to hearing this story.
Yeah, thanks, Bill. Again, appreciate being on the call and on the show. So I've been involved in security probably since 2006. For the most part, it's always been in either a supervisory or management role. Currently with Valentis Group, the company, which is owned by my wife. It's a certified woman-owned business. Been involved since 2017. We are a government contractor as well as working with the commercial sector. We are based here in Pittsburgh, home of the Steelers, of course. We also operate in 9 different states. Our triangle, I guess is the best way to put it, of core operations is Pennsylvania, District of Columbia, Maryland, and Virginia. And we do mostly armed security. We are beginning to move into the unarmed security market, but a lot of it is focused on the armed component as well as special event operations, which we can certainly talk about as we kind of go through this the show. But that's me and Valentis, and I'm an avid runner. I guess on a personal note, I'm an avid runner. I also hike. I also bike. My wife and I typically go on running trips, I guess is the way to put it, where we go away for a weekend and we run a race and then we come back and we're exhausted and the week starts all over again.
Yeah, that's great. So a couple questions to frame here, and maybe in two different ways. In your experience being in the industry, I know things have evolved, and I know you feel you're likely better equipped these days with not only knowledge, personnel, training, all those things, learning experiences to grow a company in our business over the time that me and you've been involved in this. What are the things that still keep you up at night in this business?
That's I have to say nothing, and I'm not, and that's not a joke. It really, I believe in a lot of the things that we do, and how we do them, and how we are organized. That the typical concerns that permeate through this industry, they don't really apply with how we operate. We've got a good, solid middle management team. We have a strong training base that is established up front, and policies and procedures. I have to say that from an operational standpoint, there is not much that ever keeps me up at night, because I know when I lay my head down at night, I know that it's handled and the folks that we have in the field are handling it.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I think what you're getting at too, and it makes a lot of sense to me, and it kind of resonates with me, everything I've been doing. You handle the pain in the preparation and all those things behind the scenes so that you don't have the pain on game day. Is that an accurate description?
That is really close, but I will add to that.
Absolutely.
I think that we embrace imperfection. And when you are open to mistakes and making mistakes, that it opens the door for evolution. It opens the door to get better. And if you're not afraid of it, you get better at it. And I think that's really one of the underlying motivations is to be able to get better, but also recognizing your imperfections.
Yeah, that's awesome. So, getting back to that, what do you think are buyers of security that you hear when you meet people or you're submitting RFPs and things like that? What do you think is keeping them up at night that you could likely possibly help them solve, or that you're just hearing and you don't get that opportunity to maybe interface with them, but you're hearing about it? What are you hearing out there?
I think one of the biggest struggles from the buyer side in this market is that they tend to group everyone together. They are often looking at the industry as a whole, and they think they can get a different type of entity, but what they end up with is the same type of entity that they've been dealing with for the last years, and it's not working out. So I think a lot of it, the struggle is working around and being different, and being able to educate the client on why we are different. And this really doesn't have much to do with the buyers of security, but on the insurance side, that is a big problem. A lot of underwriters group the entire industry together. So if you have a company who does things really poorly, you are automatically placed in that same group. And I think that's really one of the bigger issues on the buyer side, is that everybody's the same. So let's just pick the best, worst, bad. Let's pick the best bad apple out of the bunch. And that is really not the way this industry works.
Yeah, and you know what? It's getting crazy. That's that, and obviously workman's comp and all that. Those things factoring into the insurance. Some of the biggest expenses we have in this industry as an organization. I know a little bit about this from the past. Chatting with you and learning a little bit about this without you giving away your secret sauce, but maybe give the listeners, or maybe that are in the industry, that are fellow people in our space, some thoughts about what you can do to mitigate risk, to create those better opportunities to maybe at least be interfaced better with the insurance. I know me and you had a blueprint for that, and I'm not asking to give away the blueprint, but share what you'd like on it. I thought that was really interesting, and I think that's where we have to educate the insurance industry side as well. I'm sure you would agree.
I do, and even touching on the insurance aspect of that, you have, and I learned this going through this process over the last 3 years, where we went from this fixed premium that was very affordable to a 350% jump in a matter of a month. And we were told, well, that's the way the industry is now underwriting the policies. So that is a huge number to fix and try to offset when you're not expecting it. But I think a lot of it has to do with, you mentioned risk management. A lot of it has to do with not only risk management, but it's what you're providing outward to the client, what you're providing outward to the industry. When you look at your typical armed security officer, for example, which does give its way to liability, a lot of the industry will say, well, they meet the satisfaction of the state, they're therefore trained, and that is all you need. The problem is with that thought process is most, and I say most, I would say all, have very poor standards when it comes to state qualifications. You either, for example, here in Pennsylvania, you have to qualify once every 5 years. I mean, it's outrageous. There are other states where you have to qualify every year, but the standard is so low, it opens the way to liability. And when a client looks at that, they're not looking at that particular low-level standard. They're just looking at the fact that, oh, well, this officer is certified by a state, and therefore that's equivalent to meeting our checkbox, and that's all we need to do. What clients fail to understand is when they get into that partnership with that security company, you're equally going into that partnership. And when something happens and there's a liability and there's a claim filed, they're going to look at both sides, regardless of what's on that certificate of insurance. So you need to be able to offset that. You need to be able to offset that risk. And you do that with policy procedures. You do that with training and meeting a standard, not a state standard, but a standard that is much higher than what the state is requiring that officer to go through. And those are just some of those points that go into having a comprehensive risk management plan.
Yeah, it's interesting thought there. I feel like, like you said, the inconsistent standards state by state, and you deal with, 10, anywhere up to 10 to a dozen states, and you're kind of learning about and watching other states as well as you potentially do business there, of what these standards are. And, one of the things I did learn, I don't know if it's the top or one of them, but in my opinion, because I'm here in Arizona, the standards are extremely minimal. But in Pennsylvania, at least for the armed, the Act 235, it was a really interesting standard, a lot more step in the right direction where this should be headed.
Well, if you look at the Pennsylvania standard, it's a 40-hour course that has breaks built into it. So essentially you're looking at 34, 35, maybe 33 hours of instruction. And then where it really starts to fall off the rails is the actual firearms qualification. And what happens there is you have a course that's built on a revolver weapon, which hardly anyone uses that anymore. And from there, you would expect that the scoring on the firearms is going to be a little bit higher, but it's not. And you can miss I wouldn't say the majority of your shots, but you can miss a good portion of your shots off the paper and still pass and achieve your Act 235 certification. The problem, again, goes back to imagine missing those shots off that paper and, little Sally, 9-year-old, gets shot with that round. We have a bigger problem on our hands. So we are our own enemies in all this. We allow this, we accept this, and then we find out later, well, the state certified our security officer. Well, the state didn't hire that security officer. They merely provided the foundation for that. So the companies who are relying on that are going to be really shocked when they find out that you're on your own. And, we've kind of got past all that with that.
Well, that's why, I see a lot of models across the U.S. and I love your model. I mean, I think you know that, but where they get, and I think it's an honest attempt at realizing that they're just not good at mitigating risk when it comes to maybe an arm model, where they don't do an arm model at all. They only do an unarmed model because at least they recognize that. I think you would respect that. You respect that a lot more compared to someone just tries to think they could do everything and they don't do it well at all. And it just keeps hurting the industry day by day, right?
It does. And you know, where my struggle with competition, so to speak, is you have companies who are willing to put one of their employees out in harm's way, fully knowing that that particular contract should be armed or should have some higher level of service that is required in that particular instance. And the employees go out there and they fail. And the client wonders, why did they fail? Why is this not working? Well, it's because you have the wrong type of service. And in order to achieve the result that you need, here are the, you know, here's what you need to do. But most clients aren't willing to do that because they're concerned, you know, for example, if they don't want guns, is because they're concerned with the risk. So we have to be able to show to the client that just because an officer is carrying a gun doesn't make them a bigger risk. You, in fact, have a bigger risk when someone is unarmed and they're incapable of dealing with a problem at hand. Interesting story, a year and a half ago, we had bid on a contract. It was for community housing, and we won the contract, and it was for armed security. The client came back to us and said, we can't contract with you unless you do it unarmed. And I explained, we can't do that. We will not do that. You have issues here that's related to organized drug activity, organized meaning with gangs, and they clearly have it set up in such a way that the drugs are moving through your community, and there's violence. But they didn't want to hear that. They said ownership doesn't want guns. Okay, so we walked away from it. We walked away. I think it ended up a $900,000 contract. But at the end of the day, our team is more important from a safety standpoint, and then followed by the result. We will never be able to deliver the result that client wanted.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I think it goes back to, you know, sometimes too, and I know you probably see different things on this, but sometimes it's the buyers are handcuffed by their corporate and saying, hey, you can't even do this because it's a liability. A lot of times they're just, you know, we've used the word, probably me and you have used this word a lot, and I do with my colleague Daniel, where, you know, they do what they've always done. There just hasn't been any, you know, just like you talked about the standards, everything just stays so antiquated. There's no ball moving forward where you really see that progression of what needs to be done, right? So give me your thought on that.
It will never change because there's enough companies out there that are willing to take on those types of contracts. You know, there's an interesting quote that I always use, and I've never met this guy, and I think he's actually out in Arizona. Courtney Sparkman, I believe.
Oh, yeah. He is in Chicago. Yeah, I know. Courtney, yeah.
Okay, so I never met Courtney.
We could plug him. Maybe he'll send us some money. I don't know.
Okay, so anyway, Courtney Sparkman, you hear me? I never met you, but I love the quote that you put out there about the contract security death spiral. I forget the exact terminology, but the way he explains it in his quote, it's one of those quotes that it sits with you, and you can break it down and explain it so many different ways. But he talks about how the client will hire a security company. The security company fails. The security company blames the guards because the guards don't know. They're too lazy. They don't want to work. They're not interested in working. The client then fires the security company, hires a new security company, basically rehires the same guards, and the cycle continues repeating itself. And until it just withers away the quality of the service that needs to be provided. A lot of clients can't see past that. And you need to be able to break that cycle. You need to be able to go in to these situations and, again, go back to explaining to these clients that, look, this is not the way the industry should be operating. There's a difference between, for example, what Valentis does and what you've been experiencing. And I think that really goes to, you need to have companies who are willing to break that cycle and prove that they can break that cycle, because there is a difference. You can talk all day long and come up with all the fancy catchphrases and all that jargon that these companies will throw at you and tell these clients how well your officers are trained, but you don't do any training. You don't do anything. You're telling them what they want to hear enough to get the contract.
Yeah, absolutely. It's I use the word dog and pony show, right? It's a dog and pony show, and I use this word a lot, like operational frequency, where it's very prominent, where organizations don't really they saw what their buddies doing and they're successful, or the larger companies, and they're in that frequency of having a lot of different verticals that they serve and capabilities, and they want to do that because they want the revenue. They're chasing the revenue instead of staying in the lane of what they're really good at and just full force focus in that area. And if you just did that, you could be successful, that you needed to be in the level that you need to be, instead of, I think sometimes you would agree with this, and I think you probably try to operate like this, where you try to keep some single focuses of what you want to do instead of trying to be super diverse. It sounds like a cool word and a cool way to be, but at the end of the day, it can be very difficult to maintain that, and it can get scattered.
You do, and I learned this lesson about a year ago. We had a person who had brought on to help with developing business, and this individual wanted to break out into 16, 17, 20 different areas that we really ever provided services in. And, not that we couldn't, but there are things that we're really good at. There are things that we have performed very well in. And then there's other places that we are not so good in, or things that we don't want to do. And one of the struggles is trying to balance the expectations of growing the business, but also staying in your lane, like you mentioned. You need to stay in your lane where your strengths are. And, one of the things that often just baffles me is this, and I have not found a company that does it the way we do it, but they might be out there. Everyone wants to a la carte what they do. They want the client to pick and choose what they provide to them. We don't a la carte anything. Everything is built in. You simply cannot provide a single, or however many security officers need to go to a site, and expect them to function when you're making the client pick and choose the extra services that they need to have. You need to be able to provide the whole family. The whole village needs to support that operation. And I struggle with why the industry operates like that. There's no reason for the industry to operate like that. Because again, when you call the police and the police show up, the police aren't making you pick and choose what you want. They are already giving you what you need. And that mindset within this industry is really it's a problem all the way around. But again, if there are companies out there that do single rate, everything goes in there, I'd love to meet them. But again, I have not met anyone that does it that way.
Yeah, we'll go a little deeper on the law enforcement piece in a moment, but I'll say this too, and I write about this and say this too, and I'll say it, maybe this will go viral. Stop selling hours, sell your program. Stop selling hours, sell your entire program, what you have to offer, to your point, Steve. The hourly bill rate, that they use that's the competitive scale, and that doesn't mean that's worth. You're not just paying for the labor, right? You have an entire program of things behind that officer that shows up that day, or officers.
This industry acts as a staffing agency. It's really what it is. And so I've had, and I would say probably at least 3 times in the last 12 months, where a client has come back and said to me, based on a bid, why is everything mixed in here? We've never seen a bid like this. Why is everything compounded in this one single rate? And I said, because we bring everything. Because this officer, this staff member said that they cannot function, they cannot survive unless we provide all this back end support. And when you talk through this with a client, it makes more sense. They get it, they understand it, because no one's ever presented it that way to them. So yeah, there's a whole I wouldn't say it's a science. It's definitely not a science, but offering one rate with everything compounded in that makes way more sense than trying to make the client pick and choose what they need, because the client is basing all that on someone who sits probably behind a desk who makes decisions on the risk management side. Well, we don't need this, we don't need that, but this is what we need, and that's the only thing we need.
Yeah, legal counsel and things like that. So yeah, and I think that a lot of times the buyers of security that see that, like you said, they've only seen what they've ever seen, and you have a unique model where they see some things differently. They not really even educated about the value. And I do mention this quite a bit these days, where we have to educate the buyers of security better. I know a lot of times, like, you probably feel like you're conducting TED Talks when you're doing discovery calls. You're like explaining lingo and jargon that they're just not used to. And it's not like you're talking over their head, but at this point that you're just explaining your program, and it's just something different that they've never heard. And it's almost like a TED Talk for them. Am I right on that?
Yes. And we've had, so I'll give you one example where what I'm telling you has actually worked. And I have others, but this one particular really stands out. We had bid on a government contract, federal government, and this was back in 2023. And the government had very specific stipulations in this bid, mostly was based on the training. So when we had presented our proposal, we had outlined some differences. We had outlined specific differences between what they wanted and what we were already doing. We did win the bid, and we ended up in our post-contract or post-award meeting. During that meeting with the contracting officer, I specifically brought up and said, "Look, this is why we do the things that we do," and they said, "We're okay with that. That's really why we picked you. We're okay if our standard is lower than yours, for you to move forward with your standard, because it proves that there is a better standard out there." And so there are clients who are absolutely willing to take on something different than what they want, but you just need to be able to explain that to them and be able to educate on why what they want is not conducive to the way, say, Valentis operates.
Yeah. And they're always attached to the outcome. That's what everybody says. But like you said, to know that roadmap to get to that point is the point that I think a lot of times in selling security doesn't get illustrated to that client. They just see the end roadmap at the end of the ROI, but that company doesn't really have that roadmap presented to them to even give them that explanation.
Yes, and that's absolutely 100% true. Again, in their mind, and I get it. This is the way the industry has always operated. In their mind is they need a service. They know they need a service. They know that for whatever reason, this service needs to meet XYZ in order to do business with them. But the result matters. At the end of the day, the result on how you get there has to be framed around measurable numbers where a client can see success from what they're utilizing. If the same routine processes are being used, you're likely not going to see a positive result. You might see bodies, and you might see bodies in uniforms, and that's all they are. But where do we go from there? Like, what happens if there's an incident on site? Are you going to get the response that you were told you're going to get in that bid, or are you going to get a response that really does happen? And I think really that's where the separation begins, because we both know this industry really focuses on not so much the observe and report mentality, but you're just going to wait here. I don't want you to get hurt. I don't want you to touch anyone. I don't want you to, they always preface that with, I don't want you to get hurt, so I don't want you to touch anybody. We just want to wait for law enforcement. But the problem with that is you are exposed at that point. Are you supposed to sit there and take a punch to the face and, I'm just call 911? Hold on, I'm going to make a call to the police. Or are you going to defend yourself? And again, we don't advocate violence. I want to be very clear about that. We advocate proper use of force based on policy and law. And there's an entire, and again, we can get into this all day long, but we do follow a very specific protocol internally when it comes to the application of force. You can do it, and you can do it right, and you can be very successful at it.
Yeah, most definitely. And, getting in a segue a little bit to, working with law enforcement, you've had a lot of success in the past and a lot of pain to grow to that point in working together with law enforcement, creating community bridges and structure with the community where you're respected by law enforcement. I think a lot of times in this industry, we just don't get much cooperation from law enforcement because they don't respect us for lots of reasons. Some of it's just outward appearance right from the get-go, right? But tell me a little bit about the history of that in your eyes, and how you've helped nurture that, and where you see things headed in that space. I think it's essential. You look at declining workforce on the law enforcement side, and obviously even on the security side as well. We just have to be better together and figure that out. But I'd love to hear your take on that anywhere in the U.S.
Respect is earned, and that's the short answer. But obviously, you're looking for a longer answer. The relationships with external agencies, specifically law enforcement, they are developed over time, and they're developed in a way that they trust you, but you also have to trust them. And it works both ways. It's not just one-sided. And when you can walk into the room and command that room with not only your knowledge, but you're not coming off as a jerk or you're a know-it-all, but you're there to partner with them to make their job easier, as well as when we need you, we will call you. And if we're really calling you, we really do need you. One of the biggest drawbacks, as you mentioned, in this industry is that they look at the security officer and they think, well, this person is clearly untrained, they're uneducated, they're unskilled, they don't meet any standard. And again, it's very easy to draw that conclusion. Again, you look at Pennsylvania, you have the armed security program. You have a comparison of 6 months in the police academy versus, 2 weekends for armed security. So it's very easy to get looped into that mindset, which again, most of the industry plays into that. And that's why they lack the respect. But when you start to make results and you start to see those results, and your partners, such as law enforcement, see those results, then you begin to mesh together. You begin to form that bond that they will back you up and you will back them up. We work in a community right now that we've had a longstanding, really strong relationship with law enforcement where they serve a warrant, we go with them. If they need to enter a unit, we go behind them, and they know that, and there's a comfort level there. And I'm talking with guns drawn. I mean, it's not just open the door, get out of the way. We go in a stack, and that's earned respect over time. You just don't get that because you're so and so and you work for this big company and I'm here to save the day and we're going to provide all this staff. That doesn't earn the respect. It's over time. Now, granted, there are challenges with that as well because you can build that level of mutual respect and partnership at a command level, but then you have the field officers who sometimes look at things in a different way. So you have to work through those challenges. But it's something that's nurtured. It's not something that happens overnight.
Yeah. What are some examples of just, external extra reach besides obviously being on opportunities together and as threats emerge that, with the community that you've done? I know you'll do things with, together with law enforcement. That helps a little bit of a build as well. Am I right?
It does. So we have we have an external partner that is a 501c3 called CARES Community Outreach, and this organization works within affordable housing communities. The organization will establish different programs. They will do like National Night Out, and they provide personnel. It's a really good program that is managed and run by Valentis staff. But that is one way that we will work with in these types of community events with local law enforcement. They bring their squad cars and their SWAT trucks and they show them off to the community, but it's building those relationships. It's building that partnership. And it goes beyond just field operations. And again, you work together. You work in a way that's unison for the same cause, but at the same time, you've got to be able to walk how's it go? Walk the walk, talk the talk. You got to be able to do that. You got to know your limitations. I mean, there are limitations, but you also have to know that there are things that you still can do, which is really one of I enjoy this part of the conversation. The law says one thing, but then there's case law, and we rely a lot of that on case law. And although that particular police officer tells you that you can't do that, there's case law that says you can. So we really focus on that, and we focus on training our staff based on that type of approach, because there are things that they can do even though they're being told they can't. And again, that's an education piece as well on the law enforcement side. Everyone needs to be educated on the right way of doing it, but also staying away from the bad stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And that some of these things that we're talking about, it's definitely a differentiator for Valentis, why you're different. And I don't see that prominently in the U.S. like you're talking about. I have met companies that kind of have a similar mindset, and I'll make sure I introduce you to those people because I know you embrace those conversations. Kind of switching over a little bit more of the human element, which I think is a big deal and a big point to make. Tell me a little bit about, what you value as your company culture and where you feel things need to be headed in the industry in general. I'm talking about the human side and the company culture, not necessarily the X's and O's of sales and marketing and operations, but maybe just the, how we handle the officers and how do we create that right culture.
One of the biggest challenges that we've run into when recruiting staff is the predominant mindset of how the industry already is. So when they come to us, number one, they're shocked. I mean, they're shocked because of everything that we require them to do. Number two is they have already formed the opinion that we are like everybody else. So they're just going to come in, get a paycheck, go home, and that's the end of it. And we just recently had someone who worked for us who had worked for a competitor and came to us and was not expecting what he was required to do in order to even just get to the site. And I think where the human side of this comes in is we really need to focus on changing that mindset of how the industry is. And sadly, I don't think it's ever going to change. Sadly, when you have very big companies who just hire bodies, and as long as they're breathing, they're given a uniform and told to go to a site, that is going to be something that will be a stigma to this entire industry for as long as this industry exists, because you're always going to have those companies out there that do that. But we need to embrace we need to be able to embrace that a person it can be trained. And if you have a program that trains them and is successful at training personnel, you can essentially hire someone with zero experience, zero skills, and take them to a point as long as they are committed to the training program or committed to the training. So we always look at the person as whether they are trainable, not how many years of experience they have, not because they've been a police officer for 25 years that makes them qualified. Sure, qualified in what they do, but maybe not so much qualified in what we do. So we always have to look at it from that perspective. And we find that embracing that approach welcomes new people into the industry who aren't of bad habits. And those bad habits, because other companies have given them those bad habits. So we work on building that element around, we have that foundation already. We just introduce into that these folks who are looking to get into the industry They don't know how to get into it. They've been told that they don't have the experience. We'll take you, we'll train you, and we'll get you there.
So would you say there'd be a safe assumption to say that there's a high level of fatigue of the potential officers themselves that have been in the space, very similar to the buyers of security. There's a lot of fatigue in general, that they're just brainwashed into thinking things are a certain way, and maybe in a negative mindset, that there's just not that real benchmark to grow, right? I mean, that's what it sounds like a little bit to me.
Yes, and I think a lot of folks who, you always hear security is, you're either retired, you're young in college, just trying to get by with a job, or this is a dead end position, then you're just getting a check to collect and you're not going anywhere. You're never going to go anywhere in security. And we know that's not true, because we know that even the big companies provide opportunities for advancement. And that is one thing that really is a good part of it. There are advancement opportunities, and even advancement opportunities with us. But at the same time, in order to attract, you need to be able to demonstrate that your company is organized. It's together. It has all the right parts of the engine in place, but at the same time, you're bringing them into this culture that is not the rest of the industry. And we need again, it goes back to being able to embrace the untrained, the unskilled, and taking them to a new level. And you need to have, it's really about patience. Unfortunately, most companies don't have that patience, because the industry, the buyers are demanding right now. They need something right now, and there's no planning involved in any of that. Because they need something right now. It's so reactive to anything that goes on around us. We're always reacting rather than planning, being proactive, and discussing it out.
Yeah, absolutely. Even if you're at just a couple thousand hours, which isn't a tremendous amount of employees, but it is a decent amount, or you're at 20,000 hours, everybody has a lot of noise in their organization. As you well know, there's a lot of different hats to wear at different times. I mean, sometimes you're a counselor, an accountant, sales guy. I mean, there's just we all wear different hats in these organizations, and just a lot of noise. And I think that is one of the key points, that it paralyzes companies, because there's just so much to do. So they want to take the shortest route to get what the client wants. In all reality, they don't really want that themselves, but they don't have much of a choice. So we could be our own worst enemy. I know you said that earlier.
It's a game of survival at the end, and you need contracts to survive. You need business, you need revenue. And it's very, very easy to jump into a contract and take it on based on just, hey, whatever we need to do to get it, because we need it, we have to do it. And we're not immune to the staffing shortages. We're not immune to the challenges with constantly trying to rotate people around in order to find the best fit. I've got a particular contract right now where it's the mindset of hiring these folks that we are trying to stay aligned with, but they're just not grasping it, and it's a struggle. Now we have a core group right now from that we hired, and they've worked through the processes, and they're doing well, but it's still trying to get the extra folks in there that we need to get in there. So yeah, it's the struggles. Again, we're not immune for that, and I think that's really the key point here. But we just, again, it goes back to, we're not perfect. We recognize that, but we have a solution and a formula that I believe overcomes that imperfection and the commitment to be evolving, to constantly evolve and make changes as we need to be able to fix those problems.
Yeah, and you're not overlooking those changes. You take aggressive action to improve that experience. Absolutely. You learn by your mistakes. There's, the term is lessons learned, and
You learn by the things that didn't go right. You fix, or you stay the course, depending on what the situation is. But again, I'll give you a quick example of a client that it was a very brief engagement. It was supposed to be a 12-month engagement, but it ended up being like 4 months. We had a former business development a person who worked with us, and they sold the services to this client, but they were telling the client things that we would never agree to. And when we later learned what was quote unquote sold to this client, it didn't work out. And it was just a constant battle back and forth. And we just mutually agreed to terminate the contract. So the struggle is, number one, backing up what you tell someone, which is why we're very conservative in that approach. We never tell someone that we can't deliver. If we can't deliver on it, we're not going to be able to tell you we can do it. And I think that's another problem in this industry, is that we want to tell everyone we can do something, and yet we know in our mind we can't do it. That is one thing we stay away from, because again, it's about being able to deliver exactly what is being told, whether it's in writing or it's part of a verbal oral presentation. You have to be able to stick to that. You have to be able to back it up. And I think this industry has a credibility problem, and that is one piece of that credibility problem.
Yeah, absolutely. Just back to that point, staying in your operational frequency, you might be able to get away with a period of time of fake it to make it, or whatever you want to call it. At some point, something's going to happen that you didn't even happen on your end, that makes your officers have to be pulled into an incident, and you're not going to be equipped to handle it. You're going to be revealed, right? So to that point, it's just better to stay in that frequency. I don't know. It would make it easier to just do what you're doing, to know that you have the tools you need to get the job done. You're not going to build a house with just a hammer and a wrench. You know what I mean? You're going to need everything, right? That you honestly think you need to get the job done.
There's a company out in Arizona that I mutually know with you that I'm impressed that the way they operate, and they're strictly unarmed. They strictly do the patrols, the mobile patrols. They do some static positions and contracts, but that's all they do. And they stay in their lane. They know that armed and all this other crazy stuff that exists out there, they don't get involved in that. And I'm impressed. I would say that they are probably one of the better examples of what we're talking about here, is staying in your lane, focus on the stuff that you can really do and do good at it, and don't try to do anything else. And if you try to do something else that you're not capable of doing, you're likely going to run into a lot of roadblocks and a lot of obstacles.
Yeah.
No, I mean, it's really good advice.
So, kind of moving to a little bit more about the real threat and things of that today's nature. We're at war. We got a lot of geopolitical risk for a lot of reasons. Tell me a little bit about your thoughts about just the overall landscape of security. And you work in government as well, on the GSA schedule, and you work around some high risk environments, and you're being approached to work in critical infrastructure and high risk environments. Tell me a little bit about the way, obviously not your playbook or your company's playbook, but a little bit the way that you see things, maybe from the eyes of what maybe needs to be done, and maybe what some thoughts on that.
One of the teaching points that we talk about a lot at Valentis is the adversary, the criminal, if you will. We have to accept the fact that they are equally trained. We have to accept the fact that whoever we square off against, whoever that is, that you can't take it for granted that they don't know what they're doing. And this goes into the bigger picture of the threat. I believe, and again, I believe we are in a very delicate situation within the borders of the United States. We are, and we don't know. And although everyone speculates. I think the threats are already here. And when those threats do begin to immerse and come out, I think we're going to be shocked. And I'll use an example. So the country went on this tandem about active shooter events, right? That was all, everyone was focused on that. Everyone was focused on, the experts came out of the woodwork, the consultants came out of the woodwork, everybody had a training program, everybody focused their efforts on that. But the reality is there are so many other threats that exist. Now we're getting into weaponized drones. They've always been there, but it's not that hard to develop one if you truly are determined to do that. We talk about the improvised explosive device, not that hard to build one. And, just again, going back several years to the Boston Marathon bombing, pressure cookers. I mean, again, these are simple things, homemade explosives. So when you have this culture that hates, and you hate so much, and you become radicalized, and that's that's something I actually talk on, and we teach on, is that radicalization process. When you become so radicalized that you brim over with hate, you're going to do whatever you need to do to fulfill, I'll use the word destiny, of killing and injuring as many people as possible. We fail to recognize, because we don't know, how many people are truly being radicalized in this country to hate someone else. And hate is a very strong word, but it is what it is. It's hate. And when you hate something, you're determined to take it out. And I think that level of threat already exists in this country. We just don't know how much of it exists. And that's a huge concern.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that, and I think, we're kind of similar in age, so we won't reveal that, but where, we were in school, there was like separate camps, right? There was certain classifications and stuff like that. Right now, because of social media and just the way information gets spread in seconds, right? To lots of people, I feel like there's just 10x the amount of camps that exist, so to speak, classifications, where me and you can say in school, yeah, there's 7 types of people, kind of, right? Now there's like thousands and thousands, so to your point, it really creates a playing field that's very difficult to figure out. And I say this, and I'm sure you agree, a lot of today's threat is not that person that looks like a criminal. They got everything together. You just don't know who it is, and they're one mental illness breakdown or some critical event in their life from snapping. It's very difficult.
There is a slide in our active shooter, active threat training that we do for all personnel that identify, there's 3 pictures on the screen, and one, the question is always the same. Which one of these 3 individuals carried out an active shooter? They kill multiple people, and you find that they always pick the wrong person. But the person in the middle was the guy who actually carried it out, wearing the suit and the tie, and looks like he's dignified and he's went to school and his family has a wealthy background. That was the guy who carried out the event, the active shooter event. And you make a really good point there. The criminal doesn't look like a criminal. And when you have these organizations who prey on folks that are upset, they have a grievance, so to speak, and they prey on that, and they work them and they develop them to take that grievance to another level. Again, all part of that radicalization process. You really don't know, and you don't know who you're communicating with, because you could be communicating with the next person who wants to blow up a building and kill 1,000 people. You don't know that. And I think where not only security, but most of society, we talk about situational awareness. We need to be aware of what's going on around us. And I think we have drifted so far away. I mean, how many times, Bill, that you walk down the street and you see people buried in their phones and they're not even paying attention? And even in the security world, that happens. But what if something happened during that shift and you're buried in your phone? Who's going to be liable for that? So yeah, there's a huge concern because we are not paying attention. And when we're not paying attention, all this other stuff is happening around us and we don't even realize it.
No, it's a good point, Steve. So, like, you just walk down the street or at the mall, people have AirPods in, and they're buried in their phone. They don't even have even the ability to even see if there was a threat even around them. A lot of things get missed, and I might add as well, they just don't want to participate because they're not even really prepared to. It's like a civilian preparedness thing. That's probably another hour TED talk right there with me and you right there. But maybe that's what we need to be doing. But to my point, where just the public is just not really aware of what's even going on around them, so that we don't even have that external force multiplier of help either. It's either it's law enforcement or security or military versus the enemy only. It's difficult, right?
It is, and you mentioned earlier about social media being the way it is. How quickly do these stories spread, and a lot of it is not even true, and I think that does not help at all. Back in the 60s and 70s, and I wasn't alive in the 60s, but when there none of this existed, so the flow of information is so much faster. It's instant these days. So when you see these groups that are, and I'll just put it out there, they're hate groups. They spread information, and it's so easy to get caught up in that. It's so easy to become immersed in that you learn to hate, you learn to dislike, you learn that Bill Schultz is a bad guy, and don't even know Bill Schultz. But again, that's how this stuff flows, and unfortunately, if we're not taking the necessary steps to counter it, I'm not sure how that's going to play out. I really don't.
Yeah. I want to move into technology for a minute, but I want to move into like two separate nuggets right here. I want to know, because you're a upper management in your organization, and you get pitched things, you hear about things, probably from me even, but you hear about stuff. But I want to know your take on AI and technology. And the first question is, what are you getting pitched, without naming brands, and that you're impressed with, and then maybe the other side that you're skeptical or you're just not sure about. Love this can create some good discussion for both of us here on our brands. And I feel like AI and technology is a big deal. It's moving at light speed, just maybe even faster than the social media stuff, right? Every second, AI can do something else, right? So I'd love to hear your reality that you like and that you're hearing about and that you're kind of impressed with, and then maybe you can blow up the other side too, because that'll create viralness too.
So you and I have had this conversation in the past, and I'll start off with technology as a whole. I believe that technology in whatever shape or form is not going away. It's going to continuously evolve, and whether it makes our lives easier or worse is up for debate. However, when we talk about from a security standpoint, and I will agree with your prior thoughts on this, that together, blended, I believe you used the word blended guarding.
Yes.
That is a term which makes a lot of sense, where you can combine the human element and you can combine the technology element together, but you can't have and we are already doing the whole blended element, because there are parts of our company that have technology component, and it makes life easier for us. And obviously it makes life easy for the client, because just even down to the simplified reporting, we do the electronic guard tours, and we use software for that. However, I think where we kind of go off on the difference, not you and I, but just different opinion. You have the companies who are selling the artificial intelligence, and they're not really telling you, not telling the clients some of the concerns with it. I mean, the ethical concerns. I mean, let's be realistic. The human is developing the AI. So if the human wants to do things in a nefarious way, they're going to do that. Now, I'm not saying that's happening. I'm saying let's understand how AI is developed. And, for us, even from the AI standpoint of, we had taken the steps to prohibit in writing in a policy of forbidding our officers from using AI to write incident reports. I met a company about a year ago who introduced me to their software, and this software was 100% AI driven. The officers, it would actually write the report for them. They just inputted a couple words, and every single narrative of their report was almost identical. And imagine taking that and going into court and testifying. You would get eaten alive under cross-examination, because you could not truly testify to what actually happened, because the report is already predetermined. So in a lot of ways, this technology has made us more complacent. It has actually made us, I don't want to use the word lazy, but I will use the word lazy in this, because we have relied on it and we don't even take the time to educate ourselves. So we're relying on technology to do, for example, when we walk around and we should be looking for things like suspicious activity. We feel we don't need to worry about that because AI exists and the computer technology exists, that we simply just rely on that and that's it. But again, you still need someone to be able to interpret the data, interpret what's going on. So there's a struggle there. And I just wish that both sides could work together without having all the fluff and all the concerns that need to be brought out with related to AI. I'm against it in some respects, especially as it comes to report writing. I think we've gone off on a deep end there, and that's just a huge concern. I think that, and again, we have the data centers, which that's a whole nother conversation, but they are security opportunities, and they are opportunities that exist. But I think that, and I saw a post a couple of weeks ago from someone that was related to data centers, the educational piece needs to come out as well. So I think a lot of this needs to be, people need to know what's all involved, because there's these conspiracy theories that exist too, where the government's tracking you and the government is recording everything, and they're absorbing this, and that is something that is not clearly communicated. So again, this goes back to education.
Yeah, we want the shiny object, but sometimes we fail to really know what's going on behind the scenes. And we're probably all guilty of that. We use tools and we don't know all the other things behind the scenes. So any other technology things that you're getting pitched, without naming brands or whatever, that you kind of been impressed with or you're curious about? Because I'm curious about that. Some of our listeners are in the technology space, and people that want to see where Valentis is. And well, that's another question later, but just kind of more like in the present, like what else are you seeing that you're impressed with, that you're curious about watching it roadmap technology wise?
So I like the counter drone technology that exists. The things that I like that I've been pitched are more aligned with what I believe are emerging threats, and drones being one of them. So having counter drone technology is, I think, very important, and being able to not so much, obviously not bring them down, but be able to enforce however and whatever can be done. Because again, I think drones are not only a threat that exists right now, but as technology begins to even emerge or evolve even more, you're going to see them even a bigger threat. And, and again, with special events being one of those areas of security that we do, that's always a topic of conversation. And the struggle always is, well, what can local law enforcement do, and what can we do? And I think having counter drone technology goes a long way. And again, as the market evolves, I'm sure pricing will change with that. But hopefully, it becomes a market that we can buy into and be able to bring onto Valentis. But certainly, without question, counter drone technology is what I like, and I've liked the most over the numerous pitches that I've seen.
Yeah, I think that counter drone space is it's a big point that we're working on here in the U.S. at all areas, all the way from private to all the way to the military. Obviously, it's in big play, and I've been around some experts in that space. It's the most biggest gap right now, right? So we're aggressive in the U.S. here. We're aggressive, and international. We're aggressively working on that space. So I think there is going to be a lot of opportunity to have multiple choices on the tools. Anything else that comes to mind?
I've seen a couple pitches with the robots. I have a mixed opinion about it. I understand the selling points behind it. I understand why a company or why a client thinks that might be a better option. But again, there's the human side to all this, and the human side needs to play a core part of that. But other than that, again, when you and I have had these conversations, and really, no, there is nothing else to offer in that conversation. I guess you can say old school when it comes to that, but kind of plug us here. I mean, we are developing our own internal program that will replace our existing TOR software. We've already replaced our CAD. We have our own internal CAD now, computer-aided dispatch system. So we personally, our company is moving in the direction that everything is going to be owned by us and developed by us, simply because when you work with vendors, there's usually some sort of restriction, or they can't do this and they can't do that. So for us, it's let's do something that we can do that makes sense for us. And that's exactly what we are doing.
And I feel that, I've been around some companies that kind of, have a little bit of your model. Of course, not exactly everything, but to that point where I do call that true modernization of security right now, because it's a sophisticated level of thinking that's on par, not emulating, your own version of it, that's emulating, military and public safety mentality in words of conducting business with your own mindset, your own goals in mind, not emulating anybody, right? But that's true modernization in itself. And I think that there's something to be said, obviously, whether it be the training and the methodology and the way that you do things, that's modernizing and preparing today's security officer for tomorrow, right? Not just relying on a training manual and here, get your 16 hours or your 40 hours and there you go, turn them loose, right? We got to be in the present of what today's security officer needs. And I know you're probably very agile in training and case studies, and we just learn about things that are happening all over our industry that give you real case studies to learn from, right?
Absolutely. So you're absolutely 100%. I think we're one of the key parts of that, or adding to that, what you mentioned, where we as at Valentis, it goes back to giving the security officer the tools that they need. And I'm not talking about equipment on a belt. I'm talking about the mental skills. We fail to realize that in a lot of situations, that security officer is first on scene. Before law enforcement, before emergency services, before any of those agencies show up, that security officer is first on scene. So they need to make timely decisions that sometimes they don't have the luxury of doing. And if we don't get them the necessary mental tools, training, they will never make good quality decisions. And that's really what this comes down to. And that's where most of these mistakes are made, is because they don't understand, and they don't, no one ever rises to the occasion. I mean, we always tell people that. It's in every video that we use training, every live practical training session. No one ever rises to the occasion, but they default to their lowest level of training. So how can you expect the result to be different if they don't have the training that they need? And that training includes the ability to develop their mental skills to make good quality decisions.
Yeah, and that applies in any work environment, in any field, regardless of security. You're gonna that highest level of training, or what you're gonna fall back on that you receive. I mean, I don't care whether you're in a factory, whatever you're trained on is what you're gonna know. So, no, those are really interesting thoughts. Let me see if I have anything else here. Any thoughts here? So I do want to ask you this. What security practice should the industry stop doing? I was going to say tomorrow, but how about today? Let's just start at today. I know you'll want to PC it up as much as possible so we don't get people grouchy, but anyway, to my point though, maybe not you. It's not. I don't think you're trying to think like what you need to stop tomorrow. If you've done it, you've learned. You probably have evolved out of that and moved on as well. But it just, maybe there's some things you see that just keeps happening and happening. I know the list is long, but maybe give me a couple thoughts on that.
I think it goes back to what I said earlier: stop being a staffing agency industry. That is the number one problem when we talk about that. You're just. You get a contract, you fill the contract with bodies, you're satisfied with that being the status quo, but there's no eagerness to see the result. There's no desire to see a result. And to me, that is the biggest thing that really needs to change. We can talk all day about companies need to train and companies need to do this and they need to do that, but it's about the mentality. It's the approach. If we change that, and we get out of this mindset that we're a staffing agency industry, I think you start to see things start to change. But again, it's going to be difficult simply because you have so many companies and out there that do it that way. And a lot of these companies who have good intentions up front then begin to, in order to compete, I have to do the same thing. And that's what they do. And they lose sight of that mission. And you can't do that. You have to stay the course, and you really have to be determined that you're going to see it through regardless of the smoke that's around you.
Okay. No, that's awesome. So a couple more questions and we'll wrap up. So tell me, I know I've known you for a while. You're an intellectual guy, so you have a lot of depth on this stuff. I'm curious because I don't even know this myself right now. What either books or media or whatever, who are you following right now that gives you some of your mindset, the overall mindset, not necessarily just the X's and O's about security and ops and everything like that, but what's on your mind that helps mold everything you're up to, whether you're reading something, you're watching someone's content, who, there's someone, right?
Yeah.
So, and then I'll tell you mine maybe if you want to know. Let's do a sharing session here, right?
I guess that's a tough one. So I don't really. So I'm a Tucker Carlson fan, and that has nothing to do with security, though.
Yeah, it's all good.
So I think that when you learn, what I pay attention to is not security specific people. I think that could be another conversation another day. But I think paying attention to what is happening and, kind of guiding, seeing the things that develop also, in the world, whether it's a threat or not, but then also learning about, and I mentioned this earlier about law. Law is a huge component that is overlooked all the time. If we learned how others do things, and obviously the only way how they do it is if it goes to court, but you learn how these companies have got themselves into trouble, whether their officers did something or didn't do something. you learn from that, and then you could take that information and then develop your own policy or procedure or your training. So it's not really, I don't think it's really one or two people that I follow or listen to and say, oh, this guy or gal is the perfect role model for, the security industry. But I think just knowing what you need in order to get better is by learning how other people have done things that are wound through a system that we often shy away from, which is the court system. We shy away from it because we don't want to be involved in it. But that's really a good learning experience as a platform to get better.
Yeah, I think it's a good point. And what's on my mind these days, and you might dig in deeper when I reframe this to a certain degree, that outside of the security space, I feel like, to your point, with Tucker and some of the just different things that are out there, that what other people are doing can frame other ideas from the way that you see things getting done better at the end of the day. At the end of the day, we always want best practices, right? Whatever we're up to. And to that point, I find myself fascinated by other industries that give me ideas, because let's face it, I think, and I think you would agree, a lot of whether it be sales, marketing, operations, methodology, mindset, training in the security industry is very stale. We've taken shortcuts and it's easy and we're tired. And a lot of other industries are, what tech is obviously one of them, but the methodology, not the tech itself, but the way that we do things can invigorate our thoughts. And I imagine you have some people that you see in that side of it altogether that doesn't shape your mind about security at all. It's more like, hey, that's an interesting way to talk to my employees and things like that, right? That's what I'm getting at ultimately.
Yeah, no, I get it. I can't actually pinpoint one or two sources of that. I think that hearing from people who are outside of the space and how they do things and how they have helped other companies, and I'll give a plug here. Justin Havens. Justin is used to be our training guy. He went on to go to college or get his master's degree from St. Vincent's out there in Latrobe, and he has developed in his own way a concept called operational excellence. And learning from him, again, none of the things we talk about or things that he brought to the table recently were about security. It was about processes. It's about structure. It's about being able to take how we onboard someone more efficiently. And, so I think it's really finding the right models, I guess, that make sense, that you can go out there and do and utilize for your benefit. Yeah, so I think even going back to the other question about, I'm going to plug somebody else here. I don't know if you've ever heard of Sarah Adams, but
So familiar.
Yeah, so she's a really good former CIA officer, really good resource on emerging threats. And her content, she wrote the book Know Thy Enemy, and her content is so strong. It really makes you think, wow, we are really on the brink of big stuff going on here. But I think just staying in tune with everything that goes on and then learning what makes sense and using that to your advantage is how you get better at it.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Someone told me this the other day, and I know that it's probably you as well. I know that me and you are literally like mad scientists in our space, where you stay active and you stay curious, right? And that's half the preparation right there, outside of what we do and talking about security, right? Just stay curious. So one last thing, super appreciative of you being on this today, and we're going to do another one down the road. I know we are. We could go deep, probably 100 of these. But what do you see? Not necessarily where not just Valentis, but what do you see is the future of security? What it's going to look like? Not necessarily the good, the bad, and the ugly, but what do you realistically see? Just because of the way that it is, what do you feel that's going to look like? Let's say in 2030. That's a couple of years from now, but a lot's going to happen, right? Everything's moving at light speed. what's that look like to you? Not in your eyes, but what do you just see it happening that you're going to be in that ecosystem? Unless me and you hit the lottery and we're just out of this, right?
I wish. I see the industry overall. I see security overall tightening the reins on who is providing it. I do. Again, you're still going to have certain mentalities out there, but I think you're going to see this emergence of clients, buyers, who are going to learn that the way they've been doing it and the way they've been hiring companies is not going to work anymore. And whether it takes lawsuits or liability claims or whatever that is, I think you're starting to see this emergence in some areas as client buyers begin to realize that this is really not what the industry is all about. So then you're going to see the companies who are really organized and they do have principles and they do things different. They will begin to grow and emerge and become very successful in this business. So I think overall the approach will change, and you're going to see a different mentality from people who buy security services. And I'm confident of that, because the more that people see the difference, whether that difference is here or different somewhere else, they will be more accepting of it and know that, yes, we can do different and we can certainly do better than what we have right now.
Yeah, that was amazing. So, Steve, one last thing. Tell me a little bit about how people can reach you. And I know you do a lot of speaking and things like that. There's a lot of other sides than just the X's and O's of what you do on the daily that interests you. Tell people how they can reach you.
No problem. So our website is Valentis Inc., Valentis Inc.com. There is a email address tied to that, info@valentisInc.com. You can email, and that email will get over to me. Call our office, 412-533-5534. And my direct extension is 109. Leave a message on there. So as you mentioned, I do speaking engagements. Always open to that. I think those are really good opportunities to spread the knowledge of whatever it is the topic is about, but it helps provide the opportunity to really establish your knowledge as not so much an expert. I don't want to use that word, but someone who understands and can communicate that information properly. So yeah, those are definitely always open for me, at least, to speak in front of others.
No, that's awesome. And I feel like, like we said earlier, we probably should have been recording all these conversations over the years. We'd have a serious library of ridiculous content that would probably, some of it would go viral. I actually feel like it could. But a great pleasure to do this. Dan wasn't here today. I was glad to do this solo with you. It kind of went off script, but had some fun with it. I had a lot of fun. Hope you did as well. And when we get back and you get this back and we're looking at it, let's think about maybe setting up another one and go deeper, maybe driving it home a little deeper in some areas that maybe we didn't cover. But I think, me and you have always been able to connect, and we're influenced. We're allowed to have opposing opinions even, which I don't care, right? Mm-hmm. You don't want me to be a robot and think like you. That doesn't give you any growth, right? So great pleasure to have you on today. Always good to connect with a fellow Yinzer as well. And look forward to seeing you next time.
Sounds good, Bill. Thank you. It was a pleasure. Always fun. Thank you.